Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special Monsters of the Mind. Today is Friday the 13th, and what better way to celebrate this most unlucky of days than to talk about the Camp Crystal Lake slasher, Jason Voorhees. But before we get in, I guess I should clarify if he counts or not. Well, let's see. Jason's pretty much a walking corpse. That's almost synonymous with zombie. Zombies are monsters, therefore Jason's a monster. Fight me on this. But anyway, now that we got the semantics out of the way, let's look at the life and times of this most horrific serial killer. Jason never had an easy life. He was born with all kinds of mental and physical problems, and he was very unpopular. However, things got really bad when he attended a summer camp known as Camp Crystal Lake. While there, he was relentlessly bullied by the other kids while the counselors were busy doing other stuff. One day, the bullying got so extreme that he was forced into the lake despite not knowing how to swim, where he quickly drowned. However, Jason lived on and is now a husk of a human, and he continues to kill anyone he comes across. As an undead figure, Jason can take quite the beating without even slowing down, and has survived things that would instantly kill most other people. In fact, in some of the later movies, he even has regenerative abilities. He's also a lot stronger and faster than regular people, and is surprisingly intelligent. As for weaknesses, due to his initial death of drowning, some movies give Jason a fear of water. But this is kind of an inconsistent detail, so I wouldn't rely too much on it if you ever came face to face with him. Also, as intelligent as he was still a child when he died, so he's still pretty susceptible to emotional manipulation, as demonstrated by a certain dream killer. However, these are pretty paltry, considering that 9 times out of 10 you'll be dead about 5 seconds after you encounter him. Now, as most horror fans know, Jason was not actually the bad guy of the first Friday the 13th. Instead, it was his mom seeking revenge for his death. However, at the end of the film, we find out that Jason is still alive, setting up the torch passing for the rest of the franchise. Jason first took center stage in the sequel, Friday the 13th Part 2, released a year later. This film takes place 5 years after the first, and Jason is back and is super ticked off that his mom is dead. And he's taking his anger out on any poor sap who crosses him. Now, as you might have noticed from the picture, Jason looks different in this film. Yeah, in this film, instead of the hockey mask we're all used to, Jason instead wears a sack over his head and he wears a blue plaid shirt with overalls instead of his jacket. Yeah, sometimes characters tend to look different in early installments. After all, nobody gets things right on the first try and all that. Anyways, in this film, Jason is seemingly killed by a machete, only for the ending to reveal that Jason's body was not found. Dun dun dun! A year later, we got the third movie, which was 3D because, that was the style at the time. And, a lot of movies were reaching their third entry, so they were like, oh my gosh, this is like the perfect pun! So, yeah. Anyways, in this film, Jason adopts his signature look, hockey mask and all, and takes refuge in a barn this time, where he kills anyone who enters. This time, Jason takes an axe to the skull, and this time his body is shown to still be dead at the end. 2 years later, we got Friday the 13th 4, the final chapter. In this film, it's revealed that Jason actually did indeed survive the axe, then he goes on another killing spree, until he gets hacked to pieces by a machete, thus ending the reign of the Crystal Lake slasher once and for all. Except that we're not even halfway through. Just a year later, we got the 5th film, A New Beginning. However, they actually managed to stick to their guns. Jason is not the killer this time around. Instead, we got a case of copycat killers following in his footsteps. But he's not Jason, so that's all I'm gonna say about this movie. A year later, we get Jason Lives, the 6th movie. I guess they realized no one's gonna care about guy who copied Jason, so they just decided to bring him back. Anyways, Jason gets resurrected by lightning, goes on a killing spree, but then he gets dragged to the bottom of the lake by an anchor. However, he survives and is shown to be waiting in order to strike again. 2 years later, we got the 7th movie, The New Blood. In this film, Jason's awakened by a psychic because, yeah, psychic powers exist in this universe now. Anyways, killing spree, fight with psychic, Jason ends the film in the exact position he started it, chained at the bottom of a lake. The next year, we got Jason Takes Manhattan. I presume he meets the Muppets there. Anyway, Jason gets resurrected after getting shocked by boat cables. He attacks a boat for a large chunk of the movie, then goes to New York. He gets exposed to toxic waste and his face melts. The end. 4 years later, we got the ninth movie, Jason Goes to Hell. Jason's back. We find out only his relatives can kill him. Also, he has possession powers now. He gets stabbed and gets dragged to hell. They spoiled the ending in the title. Also, at the end, we see a glove with claws on it drag Jason's mask into the ground. That's probably going to be important later. 8 years later, we get the 10th film, Jason X. Jason's back. They don't explain why. He gets frozen. He gets sent to the future. He becomes a cyborg. He falls into the atmosphere and burns up. The end. 2 years later, we get the crossover that they teased 10 years ago, Freddy vs. Jason. In this film, set sometime after Jason Goes to Hell and before Jason went to space, we find out that Nightmare on Elm Street's Freddy Krueger actually resurrected Jason in order to go on a killing spree in his name. However, as the movie goes on, they start to get into more and more of a disagreement, eventually resulting in them fighting, where Jason decapitates Freddy and then drowns. At least until the end of the movie, where he walks out of the lake and, Freddy's decapitated head winks. So, yeah. This was the last film released for both of these movies' original series. In 2009, a remake was made that was kind of a combination of the first four films' plots. Yeah, that's all I got. Ugh, finally, we're done with the movies. Yeah, as you can tell, Friday the 13th is kind of like the archetypical, or however you pronounce that, example of horror movies with excessively high amounts of sequels that just get stupider and stupider. But you could probably already tell that by my tone of voice. Not to mention, each of these movies is pretty much the same, just with a different gimmick. Jason comes back to life, goes on a killing spree, then seemingly dies. In fact, as I said earlier, two of these movies end with him in the exact same position, which is just ridiculous. But hey, I get why people watch bad horror movies. They can be pretty funny to watch. And, sometimes you just want to see a bunch of idiots die. So, yeah. Anyways, we're also apparently getting a prequel film soon, so there's that. But I'm done with movies. Let's just move on to other media Jason's been in. Friday the 13th franchise has had several video games of varying quality. Like there's the computer game, Friday the 13th, the computer game. All I'm gonna say about this game is that it includes Old MacDonald Had a Farm in its soundtrack. I'm not joking. Then, in 1987, we got the NES game. This game is rather infamous for several reasons, like how in-game Jason wears purple, and, how it includes what's considered one of the most useless weapons in video game history, which is rocks that go over everything. And oh yeah, it's also famous for having one of the most blunt game over screens in video game history, where after you die, it just says, "You and your friends are dead. Game over." Just cutting right to the point there. Then in 2017, we got another game, Friday the 13th, the game. In this game, one player controls Jason and the others are his victims, and basically, they gotta survive. So, yeah. However, the game's servers have since shut down, so you can't really play it anymore. Oh yeah, there's also a mobile game, but it's a mobile game, so that's the only acknowledgement it gets. Jason also appeared as a guest character in Mortal Kombat 10 alongside other horror icons like a Xenomorph, a Predator, and Leatherface. There was also a Friday the 13th show, but it had literally nothing to do with the movies, so, yeah. To this day, Jason is one of the most famous horror movie villains, and is often seen as the mascot of slasher films. His hockey mask is instantly recognizable, and it's pretty much impossible to see them without thinking of him. Jason's also received several awards and has been placed on many lists of the greatest villains in all of cinema. Jason also has plenty of merchandise like all the good characters do, and he's been referenced in plenty of media, usually by having other serial killers with hockey masks. Although it should be noted that in a lot of these parodies, the Jason analog wields a chainsaw, which he never actually used in the films. He said chainsaws used against him, but he never used one himself. Well, that's Jason for ya. This was a pretty tiring video to make, so I'm gonna go take a nap. Hopefully nothing bad happens. And I hope that wasn't foreshadowing.